Hello, everybody. We are back with the latest episode of the Extra Rounds podcast. As always, my name is Mike Dice, and joining me is Elias Cepeda. We wanted to go ahead and invite everybody to call into the number to leave a voicemail with a question regarding MMA. If you want us to answer it during the show, the number is 815-570-3923. So first of all, how have you been?
Been well, Mikey D. Happy to see you, man. I'm trying it out. What do you think?
Sounds like a McDonald's.
Well, I'll have something different next week. Sorry, that's what I've been working on all week. It failed. I'll get back to the drawing board.
So first, to tease things, we have Chris Olick calling in to talk about his book and some general MMA topics later in the episode. That'll be at 2:30. But before then, it's just the two of us going to discuss some of the ongoing things in the world of MMA. There's no events from the UFC. There's been some Bellator fights, but no UFC events since UFC 204. So we're in this weird lull that we're unaccustomed to because of the fight being canceled. But the news cycle on some of the bigger names in the sport are always giving us plenty to talk about. So we'll get to that. We'll talk about Michael Bisping, Georgia St-Pierre, Miesha Tate, Chris Cyborg, McGregor, Jon Jones, and Jessica I. But first, as a Chicago resident, what do you think of everything with the World Series? Exciting time to be in the city?
Yeah, it's cool. I'm from the South Side. I still live in the South Side, so I grew up being more of a White Sox partisan, but I'm not a Cubs hater like many White Sox fans. I've always held that as long as the Cubs winning doesn't negatively affect the Sox, I'm in favor of the Cubs winning. So I'm really glad. I actually know some real Cubs fans that are not just posing, and they're although now they're not super happy because they're down 0-1. They had real joy from this happening. So I'm excited. Although I was a little bit surprised and maybe a little bit offended at how much fireworks and how many fireworks and gunshots were going off after they won the pennant in my neighborhood, because I didn't hear all that excitement 11 years ago when the Sox got there. So I'm a little bitter, but I'm mostly happy.
So ESPN did this graphic where they were showing all the championships Chicago had won.
Yeah, I saw that.
They left the White Sox out, which was interesting.
ESPN, you got to get your stuff together.
Yeah, it's I think it's just a simple oversight. People forget about the White Sox.
It's only what they do for a living. That I'm sure those researchers focus on baseball, so it's not great.
Well, let's get right into it with the first topic. So the first thing I wanted to bring up was what happened last night on Twitter with Michael Bisping. Basically, if you missed it, he took Twitter adding Georgia St-Pierre's handle, saying that there was discussion of a fight between the two of them at UFC 206 in Toronto and encouraging GSP to sign the papers. So first of all, and he went on to say in a subsequent tweet that he verbally agreed to the fight, that he hadn't signed a contract, but he was waiting on GSP to fulfill his side of things. So I know you wrote about it for the UG. So what do you make of these claims from Michael Bisping?
Yeah, I find the timing really interesting, and I'm sure Michael Bisping did verbally agree to the fight. The UFC often floats these ideas informally. In fact, it's one of George St-Pierre's attorney's biggest kind of complaints, or the reason that he seems to feel that the UFC didn't fulfill their contract obligations, and the reason they feel he's now a free agent is that they say that the UFC floated the idea of fighting Robbie Lawler without any real paperwork, without any real bout specifics. And this is the way the UFC has done business a lot of times, informally with fighters, floating this idea, floating that idea. A lot of times they float a matchup to one fighter and not really bring in the other side. So it seems entirely possible that Michael Bisping said he was down for that fight. Maybe George wasn't offered it in the same way. Maybe he was. I don't know. Certainly George had Bisping's name in his mouth too. Like, he called him out. One of the few occurrences of St-Pierre actually calling someone out some months ago. So I'm sure they want to fight each other. But yeah, I think this, especially on the heels of Robbie Lawler getting upset at George St-Pierre as well, and kind of, in addition to telling George to keep quiet about things he didn't know, also kind of said, hey, sign the fight. These kinds of like aspersions are basically saying George doesn't really want to fight, which interestingly is very much in line with the narrative that Dana White, the UFC president, has been pushing for some time, that I know George has shown his entire life and career that he's dedicated and loves to fight. and I know he's saying he wants to fight. I know he's going under drug testing now and training again, but he doesn't really want to fight. He doesn't actually want to at the same time that they're having trouble coming to terms with George St-Pierre. So I think Bisping definitely wants to fight GSP. I bet GSP wouldn't mind that fight either. But to me, the undercurrent, the background stuff is a little bit more interesting to me. This is a real pattern that has existed. We were talking offline last night, I know a bit, Mike, and this is a pattern that happens a lot when the UFC has some difficulty negotiating with one fighter. A lot of times the president, Dana White, starts trashing him or throwing shade their way, and then we see other people, coincidentally or not, other fighters coming out and kind of advancing the same narrative. So that's the part that really intrigues me.
Well, first, let's start here. Do you even want to see this fight? Is this a fight that fans should be interested about seeing?
Yes.
I mean, obviously, this means GSP would be going up to 185 to make it happen.
Yes and no. I mean, I feel like anybody who's gotten away with their brain intact from a long career in fighting and has some money to show for it, I'd like to see them not fight anymore. So I'd love to see St-Pierre continue to ride off into the sunset, relatively healthy and wealthy. But if he's going to fight, yeah, I love this fight. I think it's really cool. I think it's St-Pierre finally going up to middleweight. I think it's a fight that there's not a gigantic size disparity, despite them being a whole weight class apart, because Bisping isn't a huge guy. So, yeah, I think it's a really interesting fight. I think it's a real winnable fight for St-Pierre, but Bisping very well could surprise him as well. So, yeah, I do like the fight. If St-Pierre insists on fighting, if he could ever fight again for the UFC, I think it's an interesting one.
There was a big discussion about it after this was kind of happening last night on Twitter. Would the 185-pound belt be on the line?
Yeah, that's a good question. It would be really interesting to have follow-up. I know Bisping was just tweeting, so there was no follow-up question to you, Mike. But I'm curious. He said he was negotiating for a few days. I bet he was. I'm curious what they were talking about. Was the belt on the line or not? I think it makes sense to put it on the line. Why hold it up? Bisping, who knows how much longer he's going to fight? Not because he's not fighting great. He's fighting very well. But he's getting older. St-Pierre as well, coming out of retirement. Why not give St-Pierre or any challenger coming up a chance at history? The UFC doesn't do a whole lot of non-title fights unless there's some weight issue. So I believe it probably would be, but who knows?
So the other wrinkle here is he's represented. George St-Pierre is represented by a competing agency.
CAA, Creative Artists.
Right. I didn't know what the acronym stood for, but it was C and some A's. As opposed to William Endeavor, Morris Endeavor.
And IMG, right?
Yeah. So is that a hurdle here in their contract negotiations?
It might be. I think it's definitely being underreported. In fact, I don't know who else is reporting on it, but I'll tell you what it definitely is. If it's not a specific hurdle in negotiations or in a tangible or right here, it certainly is a huge conflict of interest for the UFC. If this were boxing, it would technically be a federal crime. You can't manage and promote fighters at the same time. We've seen throughout fight history lots of abuses, fighters getting fleeced, getting robbed, and taken advantage. And the Ali Act, I think that went into law in 2002, I believe. People can correct me if I'm wrong. But that made it illegal in boxing to do that. And WME IMG does represent some UFC fighters like Ronda Rousey. So it's a real serious conflict of interest.
Well, I was getting ready to move on, but something came across a Twitter feed. So let me just pull this up. So bear with me for a second.
Sure. To
play. Basically, GSP has just issued a message to Michael Bisping on Twitter. So this is the message.
Harry, nothing would make me more happy in the world to fight you in Toronto, Michael. Last week I met with Harry and I made peace with Dana. I tried to resolve things, but unfortunately, right now, it's not happening. Hopefully, things will change soon. Thank you.
Well, there you go.
Well, there's that. He basically put the pin in this one.
Yeah, right.
So it looks like the contract negotiation is still an issue, and that's what he's saying.
Saying it's not about you, Michael Bisping. It's about my issues with the UFC. It's not about you, Robbie Lawler. It's about my issues with the UFC. It seems to be what I'm getting from that.
Quick answer before we move on. Do you think GSP still finds a way to make it onto the UFC 206 card?
I don't think so. I'd love to be surprised and shocked though, but I think that's too soon.
All right, well, let's move on to the next topic. Miesha Tate, open to fighting at Chris Cyborg at 140 pounds. Let's start off with the basic notion here first. Is this a fight that interests you?
Those two women fighting one another? Absolutely. That weight class? Not so much.
So you already kind of segued into my next question. Why does everybody seem set on making Cyborg fight at 140 pounds instead of 145?
Dana White and the UFC seem set on it, and we don't have much of a say. I think so. I think that's where it originated from. I think the original thinking was supposedly to show that Chris could get lower in weight, and then if she did that once, maybe did that twice, then maybe she could make a cut down all the way to 135 to fight Ronda Rousey, because they don't want to do a featherweight class in the UFC,
which is silly. I mean, there's no 140-pound weight class. We've talked about this ad nauseum. So
right.
It seems like Cyborg's drawing a line, and you talked to her last week, that she's drawing a line that she's not going to do these kind of fights, and she's not going to go below 145 pounds anymore. Is that accurate?
That's what she's saying. I feel like she said this to me before, though, and said it to the world. And it's tough when you're a fighter and they come to you with another fight and another paycheck to say no, especially if you've maybe had a couple.
Marketable as Tate too.
Yeah, exactly. And if they give you, if you've had a couple months to forget the misery near-death experience of dropping down, another 5 pounds. So I feel like she means it, but it could change, I guess.
The other thing is, at least in this case, maybe I understand it a little bit more from Tate's side of things. Like, you can make the argument that Tate's a natural
flyweight. 120. I think so.
So her fighting at 140 is more than her going up 5 pounds over her natural weight class, whereas 135 is a tough cut for Rousey. So she'd be more adept to fight at a higher weight class.
I think that's a good point. I think it's a bad fight for both women for that reason. Like, Tate's really too little anyway. She's going too high, and maybe Cyborg's going too low. Yeah.
So like, I could see why her fighting at 140 pounds is more important to Tate in this circumstance than in the past with Rousey. But it's still just watching just that video of Cyborg cutting weight just makes you never want to see her do it again.
Yeah.
And if you're gonna be doing exhibition matches, why not? Why does it matter? You know what I mean? Like, okay, so Tate doesn't cut any weight. I'm sure she wouldn't mind it at all. We saw Conor McGregor going into the fight with Nate Diaz, jovial, eating steaks. Like the first one when they fought at 196, the embedded, it's him going out and eating steaks and whatever he can, because he subsequently learned that he couldn't eat whatever he wanted, despite not having to cut weight going into the second match. But I don't think it would be an issue for Tate.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, it is strange, Mike. You're right. It's just strange to insist upon it. And I think the UFC just has some issues. One, they like to control things, and sometimes it's just about controlling things. And two, I think they have a real mental block with women. I mean, it wasn't long. Now they have a prohibition on the featherweight weight class. All right, among other weight classes for women. Fine. A few years ago, Dana White had a prohibition on women fighting at all. This is often talked about like it's some cute little thing. No, it was a ban on women, just like there were bans on people of color playing in the major leagues before Jackie Robinson. Like, that's not a little thing. When you have an institution of people in power who still have these types of weird ideas about women athletes, and I think they do, other than liking Ronda Rousey and the money she makes for them, it's going to take time before they just start thinking a little more clearly.
But isn't it short-sighted? Like, you have a huge star in Cyborg who you could market if you had this division. We've seen a willingness to have a division to anchor a star. You could make that argument that it's happening in flyweight for the men.
Sure.
You can make an argument that was the gripe against Ronda Rousey's division when it first came into the UFC, was that it was Rousey and just a bunch of scrubs. So, like, that's not a hurdle that exists. But the other thing is, you have someone like Kayla Harrison, 2-time judo gold medalist, who, same pedigree or similar pedigree to Rousey with star potential. And I believe in judo she competed at 165 pounds.
I'm not sure, but it was definitely heavier than Ronda, yeah.
Yeah, it was heavier than Ronda, what she fought. So, could she even make 145 pounds? Who knows? But she, that's creating a home for her in the future, too. You got to have an eye for that vision. And there was reports online that she's pursuing an MMA career, even though she originally said at the Olympics that she wasn't interested.
Yeah, I saw that.
So Kayla Harrison's interested in pursuing an MMA career, so why not think ahead and have the groundwork? And we've seen it with the women's divisions now, how once that division's created, the talent rises. So why not go ahead and do that and start cultivating the division so it's ready when she's there?
It's very short-sighted. I think you're on the money.
Unless you want that weaker division so she can come in and steamroll everybody and be a huge star in that right.
That could be too.
Fashion.
I still think that'll be short-sighted, right?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, no, you make really good points there. I agree.
I mean, I like to think I make really good points.
Generally, but that was a particularly good one.
So let's move on to the next thing. Real Madrid said that they wanted to host a fight with Conor McGregor. I don't know that I can remember an event being held in Spain.
Yeah.
Let alone one that could fill a stadium that sits 100,000 people.
Right.
What do you think of the idea of Conor McGregor fighting at a huge soccer stadium in Spain?
You know, I'm very ignorant on all these things. I've never been to Spain. I don't know much about soccer. I don't know much about Spain's economy. But I will say this. If Real Madrid is saying they're interested, they've probably thought about it a little bit, and they probably feel that they can sell it at least as a one-time novelty. I don't know what the MMA scene there is. I know Conor McGregor's a European. I know Fabricio Verdum taught in Spain for a while, so it'd be interesting to ask him. But yeah, only thing I can say is if Real Madrid seems interested, I bet they can sell it out. That's kind of crazy, but it would be cool.
Yeah, I mean, I would still rather see something like Wembley or even Croke Park, something that's relevant, or something in the States, like we've AT&T Stadium in Dallas. It's not the most fighter-friendly destination, I guess. It's not Madison Square Garden, it's not Las Vegas, but it's a huge stadium with a huge screen, which I think the huge screen makes it a better destination for things like boxing, MMA, and wrestling, where you're basically just watching two people, not a whole football field. Yeah. The screen is a huge plus for a venue like that.
Makes sense.
And we've seen them host boxing matches that get 40, 50,000 people. So, I mean, my initial gut as a soccer fan is like, that would be really cool. But the MMA voice in my head is like, I'm afraid that they wouldn't be able to sell anything out, and this would be embarrassingly, like, it would be empty and somewhat embarrassing. Like, how many Spanish stars are there on the roster who you could even try and fill there?
Yeah, it wouldn't even be about that. It'd be about like, let's see these international or American guys. There's got to be that interest because there aren't enough. Yeah.
And it's like, if Bisping's still the champion by the time they did this, and McGregor and Joanna, like, are those three enough draws to, like, even if you loaded it with 3 title fights to do something? I mean, those are 3 people who don't have ties to that country. And Joanna trains in the States. Bisping trains in the States. McGregor lists his primary address in the States, so even
yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm also that's a good point.
Irish fans could travel easier.
Oh yeah, I think so. I'm curious though. They say they'd host it. I wonder what type of real piece they'd want of it though. That the business dealings might be difficult to sort out as well. They might want some type of co-promotion thing.
So before we move on to the next topic, let's address one of the fans in the comments. And I wanted to remind everybody that if you leave a question in the comments below, we will try to address it on the show. So we have David York, who says, what chance do you think Wonderboy has to beat Woodley for his belt at UFC 205?
Yeah, good one. I pick Wonderboy. Wonderboy would be my favorite as a matchup against anyone in the division right now. He's just a really tough matchup now. I like Tyron Woodley a lot, and I think he could definitely beat anyone. He could knock a mule out on a sick day. But I think Stephen Thompson is my pick to win this.
So you're going with Stephen Thompson to get the upset?
Yeah. Is he the underdog? Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if he's the underdog, but I would assume he's the underdog.
He's not the champion, right? Yeah. I think it'll go either way, but my pick is Stephen Thompson. I think now that he's defending takedowns so effectively, and he starts defending the takedowns before there's even contact made. He does it with his distance management, with his footwork, with his stance changes, with his feints. Now that he can do that, now that he can defense wrestling takedowns against someone like Johnny Hendricks, no one's as good of a striker as him. You can still knock out a guy that's better than you, but I like his chances.
So I don't know if you saw this, but Sage Northcutt has been spending time.
You're the one that told me about it first. Yeah.
Training with Woodley and doing some weird, unorthodox kind of things, and Northcutt, I believe, has the karate background.
Yeah.
So maybe it's a more similar style to Thompson, who's primarily was kickboxing, but he has a little karate.
Well, he was karate based, and his dad was a karate instructor. They still have a school together. But from karate competition, then he transitioned into like the strikers MMA, which is kickboxing. Right. And then he went into MMA. So yeah, he's definitely a karate dude.
So yeah, he brought in Northcutt, who has a karate background, to try and train. And I watched a little bit of it, and it was interesting. There's a lot going on, so I wasn't watching solely that to see. But he's obviously made it a point of emphasis to work on it, and he's brought in people to work with him on it. So, I'm intrigued by the matchup, and I think it's it's close, but I don't know. I feel like I have a lot of confidence in Woodley.
Yeah.
After watching that, which was a fascinating experience. We'll talk about another day, all on its own right. So you're going with Woodley. I'm going with, you're going with Wonder Boy. I'm going with Woodley. So that's the answer. I don't know if that helps you, David, but that's where we stand on
Don't
it.
put a lot of money on this fight, one way or the other. These guys are both amazing. So
Plus, I got to shout out my friend from high school, David Woodley. So there's like that tie there for the names. So the Woodley name carries a lot of weight with me. So wanted to transition to the next topic. Jon Jones he's been going on some Twitter rants again and not deleting them, which has been a pleasant surprise to everybody who tries to embed those into blog posts around the internet. So let me pull up exactly what it is that he said. So he kind of did two things. One, he ranted at the light heavyweight division, saying, "You boys know when we all retire, you will just be known as one of my contenders. Easy for y'all to talk trash when daddy ain't home." Interesting.
Sounds like something you've told me before too, but it's just, you guys have very similar ways of talking.
We're kindred spirits. And then he brought this back up to address the PD allegation. This was a much longer rant, so I don't want to read everything from it. But he said, "That's right, light heavyweight division. This means I got in that rear end fair and square. I heard your interviews. Steroids didn't give me the belief that I'm the baddest MF on the planet. Steroids didn't help my instincts. Steroids didn't help my heart. Steroids didn't help this. Blah blah blah."
He didn't phrase that very well. He phrased it in a way that sounded like an admission of use.
Right.
Which is fine, I guess.
I mean, he's saying I didn't use it and it didn't help me. But at the same time, it's like
it could be misconstrued, for sure.
You're leaving ambiguity, So. It was on Reddit, and I was looking at the Reddit thread and the comments, and that was one thing a lot of people were saying. They were saying this sounds like an admission, basically, which I thought was an interesting thing. And the commission and the USADA always takes the approach that we can't talk about it until you talk about it. And this is obviously him talking about it. Maybe not enough for them to comment and shed light, but there's still a lot of uncertainty about his situation. He obviously, at least appears to be very confident that this is going to be resolved and knows how this is going to play out. But we don't know because he hasn't come before the commission yet. Right. But
no, he does seem very confident. So does Dana White, which is weird.
Do this to Jon Jones right now.
They get him and Donald Trump in the same room, maybe Dana White, and just take away their phones.
So you agree it was ill-advised?
I guess, I don't know how much it's going to affect him at this point. I mean, I'm not trying to be glib, but Jon Jones has a lot more problems than Twitter, and he said some bad things on Twitter before, and he has more problems than performance enhancing drugs. He's got, I'm crashing my car every couple of years, I'm hitting women that are pregnant problems. He has these types of issues. So those issues have really, really, really hurt him. He's lost a lot of his sponsorships. He's been inactive, so I don't know that it's going to take him any lower. But I think generally, as a human being, most of everything he ever puts on social media and says is a little bit ill-advised, just in terms of sounding cool. He sounds like an angry nerd sometimes, And he's an amazing fighter, and I get how hard it must be for him, especially if he feels aggrieved or wronged to be out so long when he clearly is the most effective fighter in that division's history. So I get it.
There's certainly some things to understand about what he's going through. Less a fighter in the prime of his career has taken something away from him. He's fought once since UFC 182.
Right.
It's been suspension after suspension after thing. It's just it's got to be messing with him on a mental level.
Has to be, for sure. Did you see him compete in that that grappling competition, by the way? He did a submission grappling competition.
So let's get to some of the comments.
Did you guys see it in the comments?
Our good friend Jose Youngs reminded us that Enrique Marin, the guy who lost the Sage at UFC 200, is from Spain, but he got cut. So maybe they bring him back if they do that.
To headline that card.
Yeah, headline coming. Mike Rangel asked, so what's up with Jon Jones? We kind of talked about that. And David is back with another question. If Conor loses to Eddie, do you see Aldo versus McGregor happening soon after 205 in order to keep his belt at featherweight?
Interesting question. I guess it depends how banged up you get, right? This guy's been fighting a whole lot.
No. Only because Dana White has teased that Conor McGregor is going to be going away for a while, has a big announcement, and the implication is that he'll be stepping away for a while. There's a lot of different rumors and speculations about what could be prompting that. But that's the assumption, that he's going to be gone for a while. So if he is gone for a while, he doesn't have time to defend the featherweight belt. That being said, I do think if he isn't going away, I do think his next fight should be at featherweight. I think him being a two-weight champion holds more gravity if he defends the featherweight belt before relinquishing one of them. Now, as we played on our show last week, which you can check out on the Sports Illustrated MMA Facebook page and on iTunes and on YouTube, he said that he's willing to give up one of the belts. He's willing to listen to them talk about whatever the best business decision is, and then once they, as a unit, reach an agreement, go along with it. He's not saying I will give up a belt, but I'm willing to discuss it. I'm open to considering it, and I'm ultimately opening to doing it. Based on the discussion.
And that's what made headlines, by the way, all across the interwebs. That interview he did.
I mean, to toot my own horn. So, anyways, there's that angle, but I do want to see him fight. Like, it's like if you win the belt, you're the two-weight champion for a day, and then you drop one. I think you need that one more title defense at 145 pounds to really solidify the two-weight thing.
It'd be cool.
He did tell us that he still wants to keep both belts. And his justification for such was that there's nobody in the game who is more active than him, and that there's nobody who could defend the belt as frequently as he could, which is a fair point. He does fight a lot. I mean, 194 in December, 96 in February, March. Was going to fight at 200, ultimately fight at August. Going to fight again in November. I mean, that's 4 times in 12 months.
Yeah,
so
that's a lot.
He could, but, you know, we'll see. It doesn't, though, to answer your question, David, it doesn't look like he's going to be fighting in the near future after 205 to make a defense. So I believe joining us by the phone is Chris Olick to talk about his book. Chris, are you there?
Yes, thank you so much for having me today.
Hey, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us, and we really appreciate you being a part of the show. I believe
thank you.
The first book author to be a guest.
I think you are the first book author we've had on, Chris.
At least that we've been aware of.
Breaking barriers. I love it. That is wonderful.
And of course, the book we're talking about is The Fighter Within. We're on with its author, Chris Olick. I was lucky enough to get a sneak peek at some of the chapters long before it was published. Thanks to you, Chris, and I had a lot of fun reading it and reading about not only the really interesting people you got to meet and train with, like Fyodor Emelianenko, Bas Rutten, Rashad Evans, Rich Franklin, all sorts of great coaches as well out there. But your own fighting kind of journey and your own fighting path, because of course you're also a fighter. I'm going to backtrack for a second. Was a big part of your motivation in writing The Fighter Within getting to meet a lot of your fighting heroes? Was that like a big impetus for this?
I'd be lying if I said no, of course. I started off as the biggest fan of MMA, and, everybody would come to me at work and ask, who's going to win? What are the odds? Who's this guy? Who's that? I was always a walking encyclopedia just because of my love and passion for the sport. So that grew into, writing, becoming a little bit of a reporter, and then I noticed that I had a knack or a way to get to these guys, and also retrieving information or mining things that can't be readily found anywhere, really. So I thought that, hey, if I have this, I might as well go with it, and at the same time meet all my idols in the process. So it definitely was. I mean, till today, I'm still starstruck by all these guys that I get to meet, and I have to pinch myself from time to time. But it's a wonderful journey.
So, Chris, I wanted to build off of that.
Yeah.
There's a saying that's always that goes, "Don't meet your heroes." Did you have any moments like that where you met one of your heroes or somebody and they didn't live up to expectations, or it was a disappointing experience?
You know what? Not really. Well, I mentioned in the book with Matt Hughes. I just that was kind of my impetus or my entrance into training MMA. And he came to London, Ontario, my hometown, and so I got to meet him, and it was great. And from there, I started training every day at the local gym that put on that seminar. And, you know, the rest is history. But when I met him, you know, it was a little lackluster. I mean, it's his personality, too. I don't know what I was expecting, but so maybe that might have been going along that line. Maybe on the flip side, meeting Fedor Emelianenko. You know, the first time I got to sit down with him 3 times, which is amazing. A lot of the information I didn't utilize will be in the second book, and there's some juicy stuff in there too, but that I'm working on right now. But meeting him the very first time, I don't know what it is with this man when he stares at you, and I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3", 230. When he stares at you, I slouched in my chair. I swear to God, I don't know what it was, and it was like, you know, I could meet Arnold Schwarzenegger, and that wouldn't have happened. It was a very eerie thing, but by the time I met him second, third time, you know, I kind of got to see him as a person. But I guess, I don't know, just to stare and just, you know, the way I idolized him, I think it, you know, it sent shivers right through me.
That's something. You know, I heard, not in the book, but I heard another interview you did, Chris, where you talked about Fedor. You know, he's a humble guy. He has that, certainly has that reputation. He's certainly soft-spoken in public, from, you know, everything we see on the outside. But you talked about, you know, in an interesting way, him, from your perspective, him seeming to need a lot of attention and a lot of praise and stuff like that. I'm wondering if you could kind of elaborate on that or explain that.
Yeah, I'd love to. So, you know, it was hard getting through to him. Then, you know, he finally warmed up, especially by the third interview. But even then, you know, he is kind of closed off to the outside world. So you really have to get into his inner circle to see him. So you start seeing him laugh. You see these things you don't see normally. But I had to go to his wife, Oksana, and she's the one that delivered a lot of knowledge, behind-the-scenes knowledge to me. And she pretty much told me that at home, he's the biggest attention grabber. That's, you know, he wants the gifts. He likes to give some gifts, she said, but for the most part, you know, whether it's the kids or from her, he loves to get stuff. You know, he's like a big teddy bear behind closed doors, which is funny. You know, we even talked about who gets the TV remote in the household. And I guess they do a lot of things, so they don't watch much TV, but they just said it's collecting dust. But, yeah, he's very much so, you know, to the outside world, he's very closed off. And I can just speculate from my experiences. The first time, like I said, I thought, you know, the guy was going to kill me when he was sitting less than a foot away from me. By the third time, he seemed to open up. You know, he started seeing me places and so on. So he got to know me a little bit on an intimate level that way through the interviews and so on. So he really opened up, and there you could see it. He's cracking jokes, and you know what I mean. He's just a regular cool cat, but behind closed doors, yeah, like I said, completely, I was astonished what his wife was saying, because no, not the stoic Russian that I'm used to coming out, and he never cracks a smile. He knocks the guy out and, you know, punches the clock. He's done, and he goes home, and that's it. But no, he's definitely much different. I even talked to some of his friends. Actually, this wasn't in the book. I talked to some of his friends that came as entourage from Russia and so on. I was, you know, picking their brain. How is he? You know, and they all said the same thing. Usually, he's the one laughing the most in the room. And I thought that they were just joking around with me. But, you know, when I got that answer from 4 or 5 guys, I said, okay, well, he's definitely different than what we're used to.
You've also spent some time with Joanna Jędrzejczyk, another champion. She's the current strawweight champion. She's one of the more fascinating fighters and characters, even just watching from afar. On the topic of what people are like, what were your impressions of her personality? She puts out a lot of funny, goofy videos, you know, when she's not fighting, and then she just looks like a demon when she's fighting.
Yes. I was blessed to actually go to Poland last year, watch her train in her training camp, then go to her house, which is unbelievable, to interview her for my second book. And I got to really see her a little bit that way. And of course, I follow her, like you said. I see all the videos where she's funny, and she does a lot of comical things. But that's the way she is, actually. Outside of fighting, she's a completely different person. And I kind of mentioned that in my first book a little with Rashad, where you have to almost have a split personality to be successful in this game. But with her, definitely. I'll give you a little story. So even when we wrapped up the interview, I was there with a friend of mine in Poland, and we traveled the entire country. We were at the very south part. She lived on the very northern part of Poland, so we drove the whole country down to see her. She was more than accommodating, more just an absolute gracious person. And as we're leaving, she's giving us all these candies. No, you guys need to eat for their trip back. You guys got such a long road. You take some of this. She's giving us tea and all that. It was just, you know what I mean, like very old style European, and she's wonderful. But I did see her train, and I would be scared, like I said, being 230, 6'3", there's no way in hell I'd ever put mitts up against her, even just to spar, because she is freaky. Her movements are very reminiscent of almost Bruce Lee. That's what I kept jotting on my paper as I watched her. She was very fluid, and she kept kind of switching stances, which we don't see that much in her fights when it comes to switching stances, but she's definitely doing it when she's training. So maybe it's something we'll see, but just her gracefulness, and how quick and elusive she was, it scared me. And she's very dead focused, because just like she imparted in her interview, when she sets her sight on a goal, that's it. Nothing else matters, and that's why she can be so cutthroat, because she knows she has to be. If you want to be number one, especially at that level, I do think she's got the right strategy. And that's why she's got to instill fear in her opponent, just look past everything that's going on and just concentrate on the end goal, which is the win. And in her case, win in devastating fashion.
I've talked to her about Christmas of all things, and she's like a completely different person when her guard's down and she's not doing the fighter thing. Talking about Santa Claus, she's like a kid, filled with excitement. So I get that. That's a really fascinating story to hear.
Yes, most definitely. It's great to see that in fighters, I think, because we do see usually the one side of them. We don't see the full side until we either get intimate access through videos, or we're lucky enough to see them out of their element.
Speaking of perspective, Chris, obviously you haven't just had the chance to speak with a lot of really great coaches and fighters. You've been training, and you got to train with a number of them, and you yourself have fought a number of times. What type of perspective would you say actually training, actually fighting yourself gives you as a fan and as a writer that maybe fans and writers who haven't done any type of training don't really have the opportunity to get?
You know what? I'd love to answer that question. I think everybody should be training. That's my thought on it. But especially with what I set out to do, I didn't think it would be fair to just analyze without actually living it. And I'm not kidding anybody. I'm not going to be on the UFC. You know what I mean? I was just amateur, jiu-jitsu, Muay Thai, whatever. But it was fun. It was healthy. And for perspective, I think that's what's needed, because you truly can't understand. You can't try to get into your subject's mind if you haven't been there. If you haven't, took a shot and thought, uh-oh, and had to, traverse through the hardships to end up with a win, or, just even dealing with the nerves before you get in. So when they impart certain knowledge on you, you can kind of revert back to your experiences, and you can kind of correlate that in your writing. But if you've never done there or been there, you're going to lose a lot in the process.
And Chris, we're here with Chris Olick, author of Fight Within. You decided to put some proceeds of your book to a charity, to a fund. Could you talk a little bit about that and where people can contribute to it by buying the Fighter Within?
Yes, of course. So thanks to actually Bass Rutten, my idol. He wrote the forward of the book, and he was kind enough through him. Sales from the book on mnasports.com. That's mnasports.com. If you click on his link or his picture there, $5 actually from every purchase of the book will go towards the Kevin Randleman Foundation, which is something that everybody holds dear in the MMA community. It was a huge loss when Kevin Randleman passed away. So this is a way to kind of give back to the memorial fund. So So we thought of that. You know, people can't get it on Amazon, they can't get it at Barnes and Nobles and everywhere else. But if they want to kind of, they know they're shelling money out and they want it to, part of it to go towards a good cause, then definitely we partnered up with MMAsports.com for that. So we're very grateful, and I'm so happy that thanks to Bash we were able to do that.
Now the last question we had for you, Chris, is I mean, you got the cover boy, so to speak, the cover guy, so to speak, of The Fighter Within is Rashad Evans, and I know that you seem to have he seems to have a real special place in your heart, and as does Bas Rutten, who you just called your idol, who wrote the really great foreword to the book. What about, I mean, because it's not like you go way back to high school with these guys. What about your interactions with them, what they showed you as just individuals, really made them special in your eyes?
Well, you know, I did have to mention it in the book. First and foremost, all of these guys were more than gracious with their time, with their knowledge, and some of the things they imparted. You know, it's intimate stuff. And you don't just go around, telling people your dark recesses of your, corners of your life. But a lot of these guys really went deep with me, and they saw I was very passionate with what I was doing, and I wanted to deliver something to everybody that that showcased that passion, showcased what makes these guys the best, and showed them in a human light. And everybody had something different. I mean, we have John Danaher, who's very, how do I put it? One of the most intelligent people I've ever met, and also very eclectic, a little, you know what I mean? And so I got many different things from him than, let's say, what I did from Rashad. Rashad's chapter is very psychological, talks a lot about the sacrifices he had to make. For crying out loud, he missed his daughter's first steps because he was searching for his dream, or pursuing it, I should say, to get that UFC title. So everybody gave me something a little different that I took back and I used in my life, whether it was motivation or knowledge. Like Faraz Zahabi's another person I can only speak volumes of. He actually wrote the Jiu-Jitsu Principles chapter in the book, and it's almost like a la the Art of War, just modernized, taken from Jiu-Jitsu principles. And I use those almost every day. I use those in business. I use those in my daily life, as well as training, and they work. So that's why I thought that I was just going to be the vessel that brings this information out. But I grew as a person and throughout the journey, and I hope that people that read it, they'll be able to pick out those things that that's going to positively affect them in their lives. So each person had definitely a different spin or a different way that they affected my life very positively. So you mentioned a second book. When can readers expect that to come out? You know what? I'm working very hard on it. We got Rafael Dos Anjos, Joanna Jędrzejczyk, which we just talked about. Bas Rutten has a killer chapter in there. That guy should have a movie made after him. Fedor has a great chapter in there too, and I'm still working on a few key people. But I'm about half done right now. So I am hoping that by the latest, maybe 2018, we will see that on the bookshelves. But I'm working vigorously to get that finished. And there is a third project that can't really release right now that's being sort of in the works. It would be huge. So I would love to come back on the show one day once that gets signed and done, and deliver the good news through you guys first. Yeah, we'd absolutely have you back. We love your work. We'd love to talk about future projects. Thank you so much for having me, guys. It's been a blast. Hey, thank you for taking the time out to join us. Thank you. Take care, guys. Later, Chris. It's a fun book. People should definitely check it out, The Fighter Within with Chris Olick. Yeah, you get to go all around the world with him and train with some folks and kind of feel what it feels like to be just a regular dude that decides to gut up and start training and fighting. I want that job. that would be cool. You do until you have it, right? Like it's a tough thing, but yeah, it's cool. The collection of stories, and instead of it being focused on one fighter, makes maybe it a harder sell because it becomes like a little brief biography. Sure. But by making it a collection of tales from different fighters and different things, kind of creates, gives you a lot in one package, and I think that's really, really fascinating. So it'll be interesting to see. I know he said he's got a second project. The third project, he made it kind of sound like it wasn't very mysterious. Yeah, like maybe it's a whole other medium. Who knows? Now I have to
text him and be like, "Hey, man, give me the deets."
That's right. That's right.
But how it'd be interesting to see him keep going this over time. Every few years, stories as new athletes come and go from the sport.
For sure.
Fresh blood. There's always new stories to capture. So again, that's something you guys want to check out. We'll post information on how to get it onto our Twitter account at Extra Rounds. But fascinating story. Definitely a book you should check out. And as he talked about, for a good cause.
Yeah.
So that's always a nice thing. So before we go, I wanted to touch on one last topic really quick, and that is Jessica I. Jessica I has been on our show before. We talked to her right after her loss to Betch Correa at UFC 203 in Cleveland. And she just recently did an interview with Damon Martin of Fox Sports saying that she was going to take a year off before returning to the cage to focus on her one last chance in the UFC. So, thoughts on the time off, good or bad?
Yeah, I'm assuming it's good if she thinks she needs to take it. It's gonna be an interesting thing. I think good in terms of she'll certainly get better. She's a young, really skilled fighter. She's gonna probably just get better. Her year off is gonna probably just be from MMA competition. I'm sure she's gonna be in the gym, maybe even doing grappling competitions or something like that. But the only thing I guess that would be something to watch out for is putting all your eggs in one basket, all the pressure in your head, like, of it being quote unquote that one last chance, if she thinks of it that way. If it comes after a whole year of working out, of training and taking time away from competition, you're gonna have to do some work to not feel overburdened. But I'm assuming it's gonna be good for her body. I'm assuming it's gonna be good for her skills. So that's interesting.
There was an interesting tidbit in there about how she worked with a sports psychologist, how Dana White even offered to get her a sports psychologist, which I thought was a nice gesture.
Yeah, she told us that when she was on too. That's right.
Yeah. And cool that he's, stood by her through everything.
Yeah, it is. It's the right thing to do. I'm glad they did.
So that concludes our show today. Lighter lineup, less going on. We wanted to announce that we're going to do some things a little different with the podcast going forward. For those of you who don't know, the podcast is available in audio format on iTunes, the TuneIn app, and Google Play. For those of you who have Android devices, you can subscribe and they'll get downloaded to your phone and you can check in. So we do the show once a week, live on Facebook, on the Sports Illustrated MMA page, every Wednesday at 2 p.m. Central, and we will continue to do the show at that time every week, and we will continue to book guests to make it interesting. That being said, we also just love talking about MMA so much. We talk about how we talk it off of the air all the time, and we have so many fighters that we want to talk to that we're also going to start doing some interviews that we will be releasing only onto the podcast online through iTunes, Google Play, or the TuneIn app. We will tweet those out when they're coming so that you can find them easily. Of course, if you subscribe, they'll just go right to your phone, and you won't even have to do anything. It'll just be a present when you turn on. But we want to do a lot of things. We were talking to a lot of Bellator 163 fighters. So in most of them, we're getting both fighters in the fight. So we thought it'd be cool, instead of bringing them all onto the show and kind of doing a long broadcast, we could just isolate each little fight into an episode where you hear us talk to both fighters. So look forward to that in your iTunes or Google Play or TuneIn app, wherever you want to listen to us. Thank you for taking the time out to listen to it. It means a lot to us. We really appreciate it. As always, you can call the phone number 815-570-3923. You can leave a voicemail with a question. We will answer it on the show. We will play your wonderful message and answer the question and discuss it. Remember to subscribe to the podcast, iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, wherever. And please leave a 5-star review. Would really appreciate us. You can find us on Twitter at Extra Rounds, at Mike Dice, at Elias Cepeda, whichever avenue you choose to. But if you follow Extra Rounds, we'll keep you up to date with all the latest guest news and podcast release news. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.